go.
All right.
All right. I purposefully tried to change the opening this time. So
Oh, okay.
I say all right twice. Well, welcome to The Harvest, episode 6, where we talk everything cinema and story. And as we learn, you learn. As we grow, you grow. I'm Xavier Garcia.
And I'm Jonathan Garcia.
Today we're going to be discussing our creative journey and how we went from directing live theater to producing award-winning films. We're going to be highlighting the challenges that we faced and the transition process back and forth between theater and film. And today we have a unique and special episode. Obviously, you've already seen something going on for those of you that are tuning in through YouTube and watching the video episodes. There's someone very special behind us, Miss Michaila Cowie. Michaila Cowie is a production stage manager. She's an equity production stage manager that has worked for Speakeasy Stage Co., the Greater Boston Stage Co., the Nora Theater Company, the Actors Shakespeare Project, and Cast of Faith. She's done all sorts of productions ranging from smaller community theater, working with Cast of Faith, all the way through... Actually, she did the first production after its Broadway close of Choir Boy as an ASM at Speakeasy in Boston, and she's done Three Musketeers, you name it. And we're so excited to have you, Michaila.
Thank you for being with us, Michaila.
Hello.
I'm excited to be here.
So we're going to talk a little bit today about that leap and that transition between theater and film. And I think for us, having come from a theater world and the theater background, it's important to be able to just kind of go through the processes that we went through and highlight it, because I feel as though there are very many great storytelling opportunities that are being born in the theater world right now that would love to transition to film and take what they do in a theater set and bring it to like a larger audience. I don't know. I mean, we did it. And I figured that today we could talk a little bit about how we did it and how other either community theater programs, church theater programs, small group theater programs, even larger theater programs can convert what they're doing already from as storytellers into film and go back and forth.
Yeah. A lot of churches, I remember all the churches I've been to, the movie and film industry is new to them, but they've been doing dramas and theater stuff since the beginning of time. So, it's really great episode to talk about how to transition from theater, things that they've known, to film.
Absolutely. Now, Michaila, so if you could talk to the audience a little bit about your theater experience, just so that they're familiar with kind of your evolution from being a dancer and from dancing going into community theater, from community theater into professional theater and working in the professional film world. Just a little kind of synopsis so the audience knows you a little bit better.
So when I was 10, my mom dragged me to a theater group called Cast of Faith. It wasn't called Cast of Faith at that point, but that's kind of how I got started. And I was originally a dancer. I started dancing when I was 2. But when I had the opportunity in Cast of Faith to stage manage, I kind of fell in love and realized that that's really what I wanted to do. And from there, I worked on countless of productions with Cast of Faith, including Color of St. Auburn, Nazario, By Way of the Sea, The New Covenant. And then I got my degree in theater from UMass Lowell. And from there, I was able to get my equity card exactly a year after I graduated college, which is kind of crazy.
That's unheard of. You must be good at what you do.
It was a blessing. It was nerve-wracking, but definitely something that I knew I wanted to do with my life. So it kind of made the decision to accept that equity card easier. And I love working in the Boston theater community. From there, I also worked, obviously, with films with Mount Harvest. I've done all 4 of the short films that you guys have done. The last one being Underground, and I was the first AD on that, which kind of is an equivalent from stage manager to film. So first AD and stage manager are pretty similar.
Pretty cool.
That's me.
We're going to talk a little bit about that leap between stage managing and and first AD, and kind of the similarities in those two worlds, and even in directing. But let's backtrack a little bit. Let's go back to the theater. And let's go back to the humble beginnings.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about just your first experience with your first, because I know you mentioned some of the big stage productions that we did, Color of St. Auburn, Nazario, New Covenant, and By Way of the Sea. But let's go back to some of the skits and some of the things that we were doing prior to that, because that's kind of how you got your feet wet with the world of acting and storytelling. What's your earliest memory, Michaila, of theater and the theater experience?
Like my own experience being in theater, or like
whether it's through what you did with Cast of Faith or even further back.
Well, Cast of Faith was the first performance I've ever been in, and I want to say it was the Great Escape. Is that
I think it was
a Friendship Sunday skit? And I had no lines. I literally just walked across the stage holding my mother's hand as a child and got scared of the crate, and that was my debut performance.
So for the audience who don't know what Cast of Faith is, let me just give kind of like a little background so that they can understand. Now, Cast of Faith is actually a church community theater program that opened up in Woburn, Massachusetts, out of the Lord's Gathering Church back in the mid-2000s. 2006, 2007-ish, around that time. Yeah. And the program grew. The program expanded. It started doing local community work. It did a lot of work with, with some great organizations such as, battered women homes, juvenile correction facilities. We did a lot of outreach and a lot of, tried to bring laughter and tried to bring joy into joyless places and places where there is no laughter. And as a community theater group, specifically with a faith message, we did a lot of great, small skit work, and we brought it into lots of places, and we traveled with them. And then we decided let's kick things up a little bit, and we named and incorporated the organization. It became called Cast of Faith. Cast of Faith then started doing main stage productions. We started writing our own things, which is where I started dabbling in a little bit of writing and storytelling and story writing, and I got all my bad out of me. We could talk about that in a little bit and some of those stories. But then we decided to set up as best and as close as we possibly could to some sort of proscenium style or black box style of theater, and started getting into some major theatrical works such as The Color of St. Auburn, which was kind of like the biggie for all of us. I think after that specific play, sure. I think after that first big play, we all of our eyes were open to the potential of storytelling, because when we look back at that and we interact with the audience and we heard what the audience's feedback was upon that, we heard that they were moved, that they were touched, that they were challenged. And there's something unique about the theater that is very similar to the pulpit. People, you have a live audience that's captive, that's receiving a message, and they're being impacted by that message, and they're forced essentially to kind of wrestle with the message that's coming off of these live performers on stage. And when we saw the parallel between the two, we thought, what a great avenue storytelling on stage is in order to communicate to the audience just kind of like our heart's message, what we as a company are trying to instill into the world, how we're trying to kind of add to the culture of the times. And that was Cast of Faith. Did I miss anything there, Jonathan?
No, I think you're spot on. Cast of Faith was our tool of outreach in the arts. It was such a blessing to see that we were able to create stories to bring people to Christ. Yeah. Salvations were happening with stories that God just gave us. That's when we knew, parables work. That's what the Lord was doing.
And we were seeing it on so many levels. Yeah. We were seeing it on the level of like individuals that were just maybe perhaps simply just receiving healing through some of the stories. I remember even when we worked with Amira. And in Amira, being an organization that specifically deals with human trafficking, and some of the stories that we kind of recreated and worked hand in hand with them in order to bring just a moment of laughter and healing.
Right, and that's huge, because when you're doing theater, you end up bringing the humor in such a tense, such a very serious organization. nonprofit
Event,
organization,
yeah, that
an
event was-
event, and to know that humor was able to bring down the weight that was on them about the situation, and was able for them to open up and have conversation. And you didn't realize that theater, live performances,
has that power.
People can see and feel and hear from close up. It's very different than being behind a screen.
Yeah, it is. Now, Michaila, tell us, because now you went from some short skits and doing some of that work as outreach in the community, to some more of the conventional stage type productions with The Color of St. Auburn, which I believe was kind of like your first moment to actually express yourself on stage. And correct me if I'm wrong, you also had a little bit of crew work for that specific show, right?
Yeah. I was pretty much on stage the entire time during that show, as mainly a B actor, but it was kind of my first time that I had to memorize a decent amount of lines. Props to all the actors and actresses out there, because that's a hard feat. I was involved in like set building and things like that, and painting, but I wasn't necessarily involved in obviously the crew when we were performing. I did keep track of pretty much all the props, just because I was the one handling them the most in the show.
So look at you, already being an SM type of person from the beginning.
Well, and of course in community theater, it's all hands on deck. So when it comes to something like that, usually you see an actor, even if they don't know it, because at that point I didn't really know what I was doing, both jobs really. You have to be able to just throw yourself into it. If you're an actor, you may have to work on other parts of the show, like even you, Xavier, being an actor and creative team and things like that, for different things. So that's the beauty of community theater, is it really is a community effort.
It is. You wear many hats in a community theater program. Everyone. And that's beautiful, because and I do want you to talk a little bit about your first experience on the crew side of things, because that's what you're doing for a living now. But just to touch upon that community approach to a project, I think it creates an excellent worker. I think that those that excel in community theater and that are excellent in community theater are individuals that are excellent at wearing multiple hats, because that's what community theater is all about. And not only wearing multiple hats, but being excellent in those multiple roles. And if you can excel in community theater, you can excel in the film industry. You can excel in any creative storytelling industry, whether it be a collaborative in music, in dance, in theater, in film. I mean, it's just in any realm of where there is a group dynamic and it requires many hands on deck type of thing. And so that's why I get excited when I talk about community theater and the many community theater programs that are out there, and church theater programs that are out there, and just small theater programs that are out there, because that's kind of like the foundation to what's most important on a set, and that is that collaborative communication process. Right. Michaila, can you tell us a little bit about just kind of now your transition from being actor to crew, because that was the spark that led to your career choices as a stage manager?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, we already kind of talked about it, is the collaboration part of it. I definitely have strengths and weaknesses, just like everybody in the world. But my strengths led a little bit more towards the crew part of it. So my organizational skills, and skills to kind of be able to just throw myself into something, and that is a little bit more on the crew side. So when I was able to, I remember it was Let 'Em In was my first show on the crew side of things, and I was in the booth running sound and light, and that kind of sparked my interest in being able to really like run the show, and being able to see it from a different perspective. Yes, I was a part of like the entire production from beginning to end, and then I was able on the other end to see how it was affecting the audience, really from my point of view. And as an actor, yeah, you know how they respond to it, and obviously they're responding to it live, but
Right.
when you're on the crew end of it, especially a stage manager or a light board op, whatever that is, you're seeing them respond to it and like immediately.
Yeah.
So that kind of sparked my interest, because what I love about theater is the impact it has on the audience.
That immediacy in that too, because it's almost like you're having a dialogue, you're having conversations. So there's the conversation that's happening between actors, but then there's that dialogue that you're having with the audience that's happening live. Because as an actor, you kind of ignore that fourth wall, but let's be honest, you feel the audience. You can sense how the audience is receiving it, and it fuels your, it fuels the performance. It fuels how you deliver, how you move from block mark to block, and you're blocking. And there are multiple dialogues that are happening, and it's the same when you're on the booth and you're the SM, and you're watching the audience just kind of at the edge of their seat, or eyes wide open, or they're crying, or they're laughing, and you're just like, okay, and you're calling your cues. I don't know. I feel like there's a dynamic of three, just like audience, crew, and cast, that are having a dialogue that's happening live right then and there. That's beautiful.
Absolutely. I mean, in some of my experience with calling cues as a stage manager, you have to sometimes call cues off of audience reactions. Like if a lighting cue is a cue for an actor, or for them to change a scene, and the audience is so engaged and laughing, and you're not going to call that cue to cut that engagement off, if that makes sense. So it's a relationship between the three parts.
That's really cool. That's awesome. Just how an audience can have a direct effect in the storytelling process is, to me, that's the beauty of theater. That's so cool that an audience can dictate how the story moves, how it ebbs and how it flows. And you don't get that in film. You don't. Mm-hmm. It's like you have the auteur that kind of presents, and you got to get it right, because the audience is either going to, and it depends on the venue. If they're in a theater, okay, you've got them kind of caught and trapped. But if it's on TV, they're going to change that channel, And if it's on your phone, forget it. They're going to swipe the moment that you lose them. And so, but when you have the ability to say, with my laughter, with my clapping, with my response, I can have an effect on the story. That's pretty cool. That's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. It's great to know that things can change day to day.
Yeah.
On set. You have a performance that, one day was one way, and then the next day it was another, but you were affected by the audience's
We've experienced that too.
Feedback.
Like there are days and performances that we remember with nostalgia. Like, remember that one day where the whole cast and crew was just crying, and it was because of the response of the audience. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had anything like that, Michaila?
Yeah, absolutely. The last show I did, Choir Boy, we did a few student matinees, so it was a full audience of high school students, and just there was one particular school, and I can't remember the name of it, who was there, and their reaction to the entire show was just so heartwarming. And at the end of each show, obviously we all kind of felt a different way each time, but during that show, it was just, we were all so overwhelmed with all types of different emotions because of how well they took to the show. I mean, the amount of times I'm such an emotional person, but the amount of times that I've cried at shows that I'm even involved in, like being a stage manager, you'll catch me in my booth crying. That's my thing. But I mean, the thing is, like in live theater, every single show is your opening night. You're performing to a different audience every single night.
That's a cool way to think about it.
So no matter what, you're going to have a different emotion every night, whether it's laughter, crying, screaming, you're mad because you forgot this, or whatever it is. And that, to me, is the beauty of theater.
And I think about it, it's almost kind of like stand-up, where one night one joke hits, the other night it's flat. And when you're up there on stage, your performance, one day it's like you got everyone roaring or you have everyone emotional, but the next day it's flat. How do you adjust yourself to something that is so, in a way, volatile? You don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Theater is that way.
Or do you adjust?
Right, or do you adjust? But you learn from that. You know what I mean? Whereas in film, you got your camera, you got your shot, take it over again, wasn't good. Right. Take it over again, wasn't good. Right. We all know that. However, in theater, you have the ability to
mold and shift a little bit as you go.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the beauty and of theater.
Yeah.
And
I guess that expounds, or rather it emphasizes the importance of the work that needs to happen in the earlier production phases for film. Mm-hmm. You got to have all this stuff tested out. You got to work that script over and over and over again. Get the emotion out of script, out of some test shots, and because you get one shot with film. At the performance, and that is when it's in the can and it's edited and it's out. Like, that's it. Mm-hmm. Now, before we transition and make the jump from theater to film, I do want to talk about one little thing, just about finding your platform and your voice, because everybody wants to make movies now. It's a cool thing to do. And
we have so many devices, so much technology
exactly.
that just let's just make something.
Technology makes it easier for everybody to be the next, Kardashian reality star, or the next, like the next Scorsese, who started with, his hometown camera. Everybody, now that you've got the iPhone 11 Pro Max, it's like you can make some excellent 4K films. I think Rodriguez did it for Apple when he created that that snow commercial. They mm-hmm. literally made a movie, and so everybody wants to be the next Spielberg. But we're talking about theater right now and the power of storytelling through theater. I mean, there's power through all mediums and of storytelling. I know my uncle, who's a fine artist and an accomplished one. I've seen some of his work bring tears to the eyes of onlookers, because they're seeing something in it that they're relating to, whether it's a painting of, a Jibaro in Puerto Rico, with his hands stained with plantains, and they're looking at that, and there's some sort of a emotional impact that has on them. That's the beauty of story, and a story well told through your creative means. And so I guess what I wanted to say is just Michaila, you began as a dancer, and then you were on stage, and then you kind of went backstage as a crew member, as a stage manager, and then you jumped over to film, but you found that your professional calling, or rather the area that makes you tick, is in that theater world, because there's a voice that you're able to have there. And I think that's important for everyone to find, that it's like, just because technology makes movies easy, isn't necessarily the way that you're best utilized. We all have gifts that are unique and can be used and expressed uniquely. Theater has existed since the beginning of time. It's the campfire. It's, the earliest of civilization around a campfire, telling a story to each other and dramatizing the scary moments and, curling up and weeping in the sad moments. Mm-hmm. And so expression and story can be done through so many ways, and, don't let technology dictate how to do that. It's the same way when, when cinema went from black and white to color. Everyone thought, everybody has to do color now because that's the new technology, and yet, color was so misappropriated. There's a beauty to black and white cinema.
Right. Well, I think about, for instance, this new app, which some of you guys know, TikTok, right? Yep. What makes that app any different than any of the other video apps? Well, there's a certain amount of time that makes your mind to develop something in a unique way, right?
The limitations force you to be unique. Yeah.
Force you to create content in a certain way.
Yeah.
That's what makes it different. So You think about all these outlets, they end up bringing a new form of art out. And that's really what it is these outlets are all unique in their way. They can't be, they're not really, they dabble with one another. They flow in with one another, acting and performance and all that stuff. But in a way, they make you pursue different type of formats or ways of telling a story. And that's huge because there's never one way of telling a story.
Right.
There's never one way. And so, I think about theater and I feel as though that will never go away. It just can't. Just like you said, it's fire. It's a campfire. It'll always be warm. It'll always keep you warm.
Technology will change. Cinema will change. Movie theaters will die. Who knows what's going to be the next cinematic experience? But as far as that storytelling around the campfire, that theater, that stage performance of live individuals interacting, that will never change.
No. I mean, I do it now. I do it with my son.
Right.
That's theater. Right. It's all constant theater, 24/7. And he loves it. He won't, and so it's something that is constantly happening whether you know it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Michaila, I want you to talk a little bit about your transition from SM to first AD. What did you find were similar responsibilities in those areas, and what was drastically different? And how can, because I'm sure that there are people out there that are perhaps established in some community theater group and they want to make a movie, and they just don't know how it transitions. Maybe we can help them by talking about how specific roles transition, and we can start with the one that you're an expert at. Talk a little bit about your transition from being a stage manager to being a first AD in Underground.
The main thing that is similar is the organization. To be a stage manager or to be a first AD, you have to have organization. If not, there's no way to really keep things going. You're kind of like, I don't want to say the backbone, but you're kind of the person who is keeping the ship running. In a way, obviously you have the crew as well with you, backing you up with that. But as a stage manager, you're running the show. You are the person who is calling those cues, and the actors are doing what they have to do based off of those cues. And as a first AD, you're the person who's like, okay, you have 5 minutes to film this shot.
Yeah, you're that authoritative voice that is kind of moving the machine forward.
Yeah, and I think also too was scheduling. People may not think that that's a big thing, but it's huge in both theater and film. Again, especially for people who don't have such a large budget, you may only have that equipment for 2 to 3 days, and you have to get what you need for your film in those 2 to 3 days. Kind of like what we did with Underground. We didn't have 6 months to film this short film. We had 3 days to do it, so we needed to have a schedule to be able to get all of those shots that we needed. And obviously good shots, we want to make sure that we're getting the good stuff, but making sure that that's in a time frame. I think the biggest difference that I experienced between the two is kind of just the pace of it. Film, I feel like, is it's a faster pace. You don't really get to rehearse per se what you're doing. And then in stage management, especially when you're calling a show, you have all of tech. You have a week to rehearse what you're calling and what you're doing before you actually are doing it. And in film, you don't.
Yeah, a lot of that happens on paper in film.
Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely the biggest difference. I think it's probably my favorite difference, just because with my favorite thing about film is how fast-paced it is, and what you can create from that, and what you can create in such a short amount of time. Obviously, as you can see with the films that we've had, especially with Underground, we filmed in 2 days, and having those 2 days and what we created from that, I think is so telling.
Yeah, I think one of the things that also another position or another department that you wouldn't think would transition well into film. When you think of cameras, well, there's no camera in live footage. But one of the things that I know that we did in Cast of Faith is, on the early rehearsal days, just before we were on stage, we went on stage with the cameras. And we danced with the actors.
Like that. We were interesting like that.
Yeah.
We brought the film element to stage to prepare them for theater, which was a unique experience.
Right, it was very unique. Most cameras, when they're being filmed on a set, they're way back, kind of like, the TV shows type where it's set and it's just kind of just panning or whatever.
Oh, you're saying when you want to film a show to kind of have it archived,
online.
Yeah, it's just kind of tripod set,
exactly.
Get the whole stage. Yeah.
But we were kind of film style, wedding style, more so, because it was kind of live, going on the go. You got to get the shot. But you would be surprised how it also affected the actors, because the performances were very different.
Yeah.
But they were able to find an emotion that they were going to try to express even louder on theater when there was no camera. Because when the camera's close, everything's very tight. You get the emotion. It's very small. You feel it. When the camera's there, the person doesn't have to do too much, but you can feel it through the camera. Now they have captured that feeling, and they're like, I like how that felt. How could I express that so that more people can see that? You know?
How can I throw that to the back row?
And I remember one of our actors being able to take that same feeling to the next level in The Color of St. Auburn, when he's banging on the table, when he's drinking, or when he's about to commit suicide. He's got a little small shake, but in the performance, he's like, wow, the shake really made me kind of build my character. So he paced when he was on theater. He paced and shaked, and so he was able to develop. He was able to find feelings, even though that there was a camera on set. So the footage was okay. I mean, it wasn't anything that you can start selling everywhere, because it's theater. You kind of just flowing. You can't block it. You can tell them where to go and where to go around.
We wanted to keep it live, let it live, but then as much as possible for us ourselves, just kind of be in there filming around their blocking.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised how effective that was to film, and how much you learned as a camera operator.
Yeah, so that's super interesting. Now, most people would look at that and think, oh my gosh, that's probably super detrimental for the theater actor, because they've rehearsed something to be able to reach the back row. They've rehearsed for a live audience inside and a wide open space. And so then when you're putting cameras in their face, isn't that going to change the whole performance? Isn't that going to disrupt everything? But I think why we had success with it is similar to when with exercising, when you do like kind of like shock exercise with the stuff that's like really vogue now, and my mind is blanking on
CrossFit?
Yeah, CrossFit. So thank you. CrossFit, the whole science behind CrossFit is that you're shocking your muscles, right? It's like you're doing things that are extreme, and that's a shock. And so I think that what we did by bringing the cameras, that like they were forced to just stop for a second and kind of reset and watch and rethink and kind of have like a moment of reflection to see what they were doing. And it's like, wait, is this good? And so most people would think, no, you're disrupting their flow, you're ruining the character, whatever it is that they've prepared for the performance. But I think what it helped our actors to do is just to kind of stop and not just go through the motions, and not just go through what they have memorized, and actually kind of take a second to look at themselves.
Yeah, and develop a range of the performance, from small scale to large scale. You don't know who's in the front row seeing it at a small scale. You don't know who's in the back row seeing it at a large scale. And so you have to have the knowledge of your performance, and how it's coming out. And I think it really helped. You'd be surprised. It really helped a lot of our actors.
And it was really helpful for us in the transition, going from theater to film, because we learned a lot. We learned about camera moves. We learned about emotion. We learned about, why things are so big why it doesn't transition the same, and why it looks so big when it's in theater, and and how it needs to be made smaller for film. And I'm talking about emotion, expression, dialogue, that kind of stuff.
Which reminds me of one of our production team members would always say, they would always read our scripts and they say, "This is a movie. What are you doing? This is a movie."
Yes.
And so
we've
we're
always
guilty. We've always written
film.
Yeah, we've always written it where we know at some point this thing is going to be transitioned to a film. But at the end of the day, we try to box ourselves in to develop it as a theatrical performance so that we can learn, again, with the range. What are actors doing? What can we do with lighting? And how can we set it up? Where could we a set on the stage versus a set in location? How do we want to dress it? Dressing. These are all departments that easily transition into film.
Yeah.
And you'd realize quickly that, you'll learn a lot.
Yeah.
Just working in your local church and theaters, or in your town local theater,
community
theater.
group.
Yeah. So it's you'd be surprised how much you learn if you want to get into before you fly out to like Hollywood or some other
wherever
location,
wherever it is.
It's
Independent local filmmaking. Absolutely.
Those are great sources.
So now, just kind of want to transition topics before we close this. Talking about advice that we would give to whether it's a community theater group, a small theater group, a local theater group, a church theater group, what advice we can give in order to make the transition? Michaila, is there anything, because I know you've gotten a lot of people that have asked you personally about that transition and the transition from stage to screen. Is there anything that like you have in your back pocket as like, okay, these are first and foremost, these are the top advices that I give somebody that's trying to make that transition?
I think the first thing would be, and I think this is with anything, just go for it. You have to be confident in what you're doing, whether it is acting or operating a camera. I just think that, again, in any life form, that is something that you need to always remember. But I would also just say, do your research, especially when you're going from theater to film. It's a different world. Yes, it's in kind of the same atmosphere, but in like same, what's the word I'm looking for? Help me out here, boys. Like medium, I guess, in a way. But when I was asked to be first AD on Underground, I did a lot of research on the tasks of a first AD and different things on what works and what doesn't work. And, I think would be the biggest thing. You have to be able to figure out how to use your skills from point A to point B, and that really comes from research.
Yeah, it does. Being prepared. And that's something that we, since episode 1, we've been talking about, like the importance of just, research, preparation, kind of knowing what you're doing, having dotted all your I's and crossed all of your T's prior to just kind of stepping, whether it be into the theater or on the set, just be so that you can be confident.
Right.
That you can be confident.
And I would say in theater, learn everything. Get your hands involved in everything.
Yeah, and community theater. Yeah, take advantage of that.
Yeah, just when you're in there, be crew. Be any department that you
get
can
involved
be,
with costumes, with makeup,
exactly.
with props.
Learn all of it, because the moment you make that transition, you'll be like, oh, I have confidence. Number one, they'll see your work ethic. You've built a great work ethic.
Yeah,
and everyone loves that.
Yeah.
And you'll see, oh, I know how to do this because I learned that here or there.
And, it's interesting. I think there's this unfortunate reputation for film, especially the closer to Hollywood that you get, the closer to big studio films that you get. There's this mantra, like, just don't do someone else's job. Do your job and do it well. But that's not the case on an independent film set. And that's certainly not the case in a community theater group. Because it is more of an all hands on deck. And I'm not saying be the guy that's like, or the girl that's showing off and, and making others look bad because they're not doing their job, but be a help.
A help, yeah.
A servant helper to everyone or every department or wherever you're needed. And when you've done your due diligence in those community settings, whether it's, community theater or small indie filmmaking, you are that Swiss Army person that can be so effective. And I know for a fact personally, just as a producer and director, I love inviting back those individuals onto my sets that were that
initiative,
that helper, that worker, that hard worker that was like, okay, they see a crew member struggling with something and they'll go there and they'll be like, do you need a hand? Whether or not the person is going to say yes or no, whatever it is, like they're willing to kind of foresee what needs to be done, what needs to be accomplished, and they're not just waiting for it to, to crash. If there's something's going to fall, they'll be the first one there to put a hand on it, that type of thing, because they're aware they've been in an independent, small type of space enough to know that like I'm useful. And if they have that kind of confidence in the work that they've done when they had the time to do it, they'll be able to be that aid on a bigger set and a bigger opportunity. Yeah, absolutely.
How you doing, Michaila? Still got you? Oh, cool. All right.
Well, you know what? This is good because we can kind of transition here to our closing segment. I think this is a much bigger topic that's going to take maybe more than one conversation.
Sure.
And we can revisit this in the next episode. But Michaila, we're now talking about Creators Tip of the Week. In this segment, we just find anything or at all that may be inspiring towards your creativity or towards your work. It could be anything at all. And I'll start us off with my Creators Tip of the Week is actually about your support group. And building a support group around you, and the importance of having a support group and a kind of like a team that you can go back to, whether or not that support group is directly involved in your projects or not. Is irrelevant. If they're directly involved in your projects, that's great. That's probably usually, like if you're a director, it's probably perhaps your first AD, or your scripty or second AD or something like that, or an assistant that you may have. But it doesn't necessarily have to be. And I just want to shout out someone for our Creators Tip of the Week. It's more of a shout out. I just want to shout out Allison Betts. Allison has been supporting the work that we've done from theater all the way back from the very beginnings to film. And not only has she been a support in, sending us emails and encouraging letters, but she's also been a financial support to everything that we've done from the very beginning. And that is encouraging on so many levels. First and foremost, it's encouraging us to continue the work that we do, but it's also encouraging that it's important enough to someone that they're willing to put, themselves in it emotionally and even out of their wallets. And that's a huge blessing to me. It's a blessing to us. It's a blessing to all the work that we've done. So my Creators Tip of the Week is really a shout out and the importance of, just friends and family when you're involved and engaged in creative events and creative efforts.
I love it.
Michaila, what do you got?
My turn. I think my biggest thing, before I do anything, before I go into a rehearsal, before I go into a show, before I step on a film set and really put that hat on, I always have to listen to music. That's my biggest thing, and preferably worship music and praise. My favorite right now that I've been listening to, even though I'm not working on a project, but that I listen to in the morning and at night before I go to bed is Israel Houghton. He's definitely one of my favorites. But that would just be my tip, is to kind of find your outlet that whether it's 5-10 minutes before and after whatever you're doing, whether it's writing or performing, finding something that you can do just by yourself and motivating yourself before you do anything.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I think one thing that starting off I wanted to find out was, when you don't have any money, how do you get your hands on equipment? Right? I mean, everyone's like, how do you play with the new Ari? How can I, learn lights?
Camera.
How could I figure all this stuff up? Figure it out if I don't have the money to play with it. If you look at your local city, town, and you do research on rental studios, most rental studios will hold a class, sometimes free.
Yeah.
And for instance, I'm in the Boston area, so Rule
Yes,
has
that's
awesome
right.
classes
They're awesome.
that you
Rule
can just
Boston
go
camera.
there
Yes.
and learn the equipment, play
Yes.
with it, and it's not like you're, at any time they have classes
All the time.
and you'll learn the new equipment, the new stuff that's coming out, and they love it. They love teaching, and sometimes you'll get an industry professional that'll come in and do a class even in there.
Oh yeah.
As well as I believe LensProToGo does it as well. Sometimes they'll have some
They're based
teaching
out of
some
Concord.
classes.
Yep.
Yeah, and if you want to, before you rent equipment, you can test it there in location and learn how to play with it. I think that is the first step for you to
That's
start learning
awesome.
equipment, getting equipment hands-on,
Awesome advice.
and begin to learn what's good out there.
Awesome advice.
Yeah.
That's awesome advice. I'll give an extra tip of the week just as a bonus. Here's a bonus one. Almost every town has a public access television station. And public access television station is there for the town. It's there for you. And they have equipment. And they will graciously, some of them are for a very, very low price. I think it's like an annual. I think in our town it's like
$50
$50, $100 for the
or
year.
even free.
And some towns just do it for free.
Yeah,
absolutely.
if you have your, if you live in the town and you got your license and you say, oh, my license, I'm from the same town, they'll say, all right, you get a free membership.
Yeah. And so, and they have equipment, and it might not be the top of the line, but at least you can get your hands on. And that's how we started with a lot of when we were doing our community theater. We worked with our public access station to film the theater programs, and then they would play it on public access. And so not only were we getting the live audience, but we were also getting the public access TV audience, which was a huge thing for us. Those resources are out there. You just have to do your research. Thank you for bringing that one up, Jonathan. That's an awesome one. Guys, that's all the time that we have for episode 6 of The Harvest. Thank you so much for spending this time with us and joining us. First and foremost, we want to give a special thanks to our producer, Alana Despena. Soon we will have, I promise, we will have all of the show notes up and the transcripts of our shows at mountharvest.com. If they, perhaps they may even already be up on that website by the time this episode comes out. If you want to support The Harvest, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/The Harvest Podcast. And if you have any questions for me, I am Xavier Garcia at Twitter at xgarcia.
Yeah, and on Twitter, I am at Jonathan Harvest.
Michaila, I know you don't have a Twitter account, or maybe you do, but you're not active on it, but you do have an Instagram, correct?
Yes, you can always reach out to me on Instagram at Michaila Marie. My name is spelled a little different. It's Michaila Marie. Feel free to send me any information that you need or question.
Awesome. And that's an awesome resource right there. You can always hit her up and get in any questions that you may have. And for any longer questions, you can write to us at info@mountharvest.com. That's info@mountharvest.com. By the time this episode airs, you will have already seen Underground. Underground, I guess would have aired yesterday. On Patriots Day. So if you have any questions at all about Underground, now that you have seen it, anything at all that you'd like to discuss at all, please feel free to shoot us an email at info@mountharvest.com, and we can talk about it on the next episode. Thank you guys so much.
Yep. Like, share, subscribe.